Christmas. Welcome to cookie decorating. My name is Kristen Grunder from Grunderfully Delicious. I am so happy that you're here. It has already been a crazy month for me, and we're not even in December, which is crazy. We started Christmas early, and now I'm going to go ahead and go over this new set, which I'm super excited about. I haven't currently started any of these classes yet locally, so this is my first time going through it. Yeah, so just a quick rundown of the class. I'm going to show you step by step how to outline your cookies, how to fill them in. So anytime I'm doing any kind of demonstration on the screen, if you can just make sure that you're watching, because I want your cookies to look just like mine. So yeah, as long as you watch the instruction, you should be good to go. Otherwise, good luck to you. Just kidding. All right, so I'm just gonna go over what we have here in our cookie kit. This is actually also my first time pre-recording the class. So it is November 28th today. Classes start on Friday. So this is the first time I have pre-recorded it for my local kits. So I hope you guys like it. I feel like it's gonna be nice because now you guys can fast forward through everything. There's also not gonna be a lot of like waiting around for people to finish their cookies. So you're gonna go ahead, you have your icing pack, you're gonna take that out. All your cookies, just take them out. You don't need to take them out of the packs yet, but just set them aside. Our featured flavor is gingerbread, which is so delicious. I love it. It's not like too gingery. It's got a nice little soft bite to it. We also have some glitter, just a little bit of glitter for our cookies, and some nonpareils and black pearls. We're gonna set that aside. And then this part's what we're gonna take a look at here. So we've got our little packet. I'm just gonna set this down. This little packet we're gonna open up and take out everything that's in there. I've got my practice sheet, which I'm gonna set in front of me right now. Boink. We have extra piping bags. So if you cut your hole too big, you have some backup. But we do need one of these bags at the end to do some details. So make sure you at least have one for the end. And then you have your little scribe tool, okay? Your little picture. I like to keep the picture in front of me while I'm decorating so I can refer back to it if I ever need to know what's next and what they're supposed to look like. And then lastly, a little paintbrush, which I'll go over in a little bit, but that's what we've got. All right, so once all of your icing packs are out and you have your practice sheet in front of you, you're gonna go ahead and just start massaging your bags while you're watching me go over this demo. So if you notice, there's a lot of plastic on this bag. I actually like to cut off the plastic, and when you're cutting this off, if you want to, it does seem to get in the way of the cookies though, so I like to cut it, but when I'm cutting it, I'm making sure not to cut too close to the tape, because if you cut too close to the tape, what's gonna happen is the icing's gonna come up the top, so you need to be careful to not cut too close to that. And you're also gonna give all your bags a nice massage. So we're gonna practice with our pink icing. Practice with pink. And the way you cut your bag is probably the most important part of class. And real quick, I just wanna come on here and just reiterate. It's the most important part of class. I really hope you're paying attention here, because if you cut your hole incorrectly, you're gonna have a little bit of trouble outlining your cookies, so just make sure you're paying attention. All right, so if you feel your bag, there's a seam. I like to point the seam up toward the ceiling and I center it. So the seam is right here, I center the seam and then I flatten my tip. My seam is only pointed up when I'm cutting the bag. It doesn't need to be pointed up anywhere else in class, just when you're initially cutting your bag. So I flatten the tip. I'm gonna cut so small, like smaller than I think I need, because you can always cut more, and this little hole will deceive you because you might think you're cutting it really tiny, but this icing is really loose, so it will come out really fast on you. So you wanna make sure you always cut your hole smaller than you think you need. Anytime I cut my hole, I go ahead and take my paper towel and just squeeze a little bit in my paper towel to get that air out of the bag. My goal is to get the hole the same thickness as this black line here, okay? The way that I hold my bag is I pinch that tape with my thumb and my pointer finger, and I roll the pod so it's nice and tight. I'm always holding this tape closed because even though that tape is there, the icing can still come up the top. So you always want to make sure you're holding that closed. I'm going to squeeze with these 3 fingers and my palm. Again, we're using the pink icing to practice. I hold my wrist steady. I start with my tip touching the paper. I squeeze, and as soon as the icing hits the paper, I'm lifting my bag. Again, the thickness of this line is the thickness of the black line here. And because I'm lifting high, I'm going to release the pressure here, and then I lay the rest of the line down. Okay, so if your line is breaking, that means you're not putting enough pressure on your bag. If your line is squiggly, either your hole is too small or you're putting too much pressure. So again, my tip is touching. I lift right away with my pink icing. I'm not dragging my tip, and I'm squeezing it just hard enough to where that line is not breaking. Release the pressure, lay that line down. Okay? One thing you need to remember is you want to keep your tip clean, so I'm often just like swiping it. A lot of you guys like to lick it. It's good to have also a damp paper towel. I'm going to get mine wet right now. But royal icing tends to get really crusty. So if you have a damp paper towel near you, you can also wipe your tip on that as well. Yeah, so always keep your tips clean. Once you're done with those lines, you're going to move on to the waves and the swirls. So with the waves, again, I'm twisting this bag so that the pod is nice and tight. I'm going to bring those waves up. So I start with my tip on the paper again, but this time I'm looking a little bit ahead of where I want that icing to fall, and I'm going a little bit slower, okay? Just a touch slower, still lifting. I'm not dragging my tip, and then when I'm ready to stop, I release the pressure, lay that down, give my tip a little swipey swipe, and then with the waves, tip is touching, or sorry, these are the swirls. Lifting up, looking a little bit ahead of where I want that icing to fall. When I'm ready to stop, I release that pressure first, then I lay the rest of the line down. Okay, with the circle, we kind of have a circle today with our Gingy's head, so I really want you to practice that. You're going to do the same thing, starting here, lifting, but now you're going to go even slower. Still looking a little bit ahead of where you want that icing to fall, but being patient, taking your time. Don't forget to breathe. Just going around in a circle. And when I'm ready to stop, I release that pressure, lay the tip down. And then the last thing here that I want to show you is every edge or corner, you want to put your tip back down. So any point, any indent, that way you get nice clean edges, and also you regain control of that icing. So I have a starting point here, I'm lifting, looking a little bit ahead of where I want that icing to fall. When I get to the bottom, I just put my tip down, okay? Then I start where I left off and I lift up again. Then go all the way around, release the pressure, lay that tip down. Okay, so when you're all done with your practice sheet, you're just gonna fold it in half and set it aside. And go ahead and pause this until you're ready for the next step. Once you're done with your practice sheet, you're going to go ahead and take all of your cookies out. We're going to start with our gingerbread house as well as our tree, so I'm going to put those two in front of me. When you guys are decorating your cookies, you're going to start with your first cookie and then move on to your second cookie of the same design, and then you'll move on to the next step, okay? So I want you to finish both of the cookies. I'm only going to show you once on here, but I want you to finish both of them, and then you can move on to your next cookie. We're gonna go ahead and start with our house, our gingerbread house first. So while you guys are watching, go ahead and start massaging your green icing as well as your brown icing, so that is nice and mixed up. I like to always massage my bags first because sometimes the royal icing tends to separate with the water being in there and if they sit around for a little bit. And you just want to make sure there's no blotchiness. All right, so we're going to start with the house. here we go. All right, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to outline my house cookie. Again, it's really important to have that seam pointed up toward the ceiling, flattening that tip, pressing it down, and then I'm going to take my scissors and cut a teeny tiny hole straight across. So the green is a looser consistency than our pink was, so it's going to come out a lot quicker. So you want to make sure you kind of cut a smaller hole than you did with the pink, because it is going to come out a little bit faster. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to outline this roof. I start with my tip on the cookie. I squeeze and I lift right away as soon as the icing hits that cookie. I'm lifting, I'm going as close to the edge as I can go, and then I'm going to put my tip back down. Remember what we practiced with the heart? So I'm taking my green and I'm just outlining the shape of the house, tip down. And when you guys get to your cookies, I would go ahead and outline it in the same order that I'm outlining it. It's just an easier way. I've done it all, so tip is going down right here where this indent is. So once that is done, now I'm going to go ahead. I like to look at that line above just to make sure I'm evenly spacing that out, and then my tip goes back down. I'm looking at that so that I know where I'm centering, and then the other side as well. Okay, once that is done, you're going to go ahead and take your red. My red needs a little extra massaging. I see some white in there. Let me just give that a good massage, and I'm flattening that tip, small hole straight across, and I'm going to outline my door. So I like to make sure I'm looking at that picture so I can see what is going on, what I need to leave room for. I need some room for those lollipops, so that's what I'm just keeping in mind when I am making the door. I'm lifting, going up, 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 and then back down. Okay, once I've done that, now I'm going to close that up. I like to outline my cookies because this will help keep the icing from spilling over the edge, okay? It won't completely prevent it from happening, but it's just that extra protection. Then I'm going to take my brown, cut a small hole again. Don't forget to center that seam. Again, the brown is very loose. And then I'm going to outline the rest of the house. But if you see, I just messed up. I messed up big time. It's okay though, it's okay. Anytime you're not happy with a certain line that you do, you're just gonna take your scribe and just sort of wipe that off, okay? I'm using that fatter end to wipe it off, or you can use the tip. It's just really important to make sure that you are keeping that tip clean. You don't want any crusties here on the tip of your scribe. So again, that brown icing is a lot looser, so you are going to want to cut smaller. I probably could have cut mine a touch smaller, but we're going to go with it. So tip down, lift up, tip down, all the way around the cookie. Once you're done with that, you're going to take your pink and you're going to just squirt some pink on here, just messily, and then I'm going to take my paintbrush and just paint this on here like so. I'm just brushing it gently. This is where our heart is going to go. You don't want it to be a thick layer of pink, you just want it to cover that cookie, okay? You don't want to see cookie underneath. But if it's too bumpy and thick, you're going to have a hard time doing your heart. So you want to make sure it's kind of smooth. Once that's smooth, and you can keep wiping off your paintbrush if you need to take some off, then you're going to take your glitter and you're going to just put that brush in there and just tap some glitter on there. Make sure your brush is dry. Come on. There we go. And we're going to let that dry for a minute, so I'm going to show you how to outline the tree next. All right, so tree is coming next. We're gonna let that outline dry a little bit. That way we don't knock it off. And we're gonna go ahead and outline our trees. So again, I'm gonna start with my tip on the cookie, going as close to the edge as I can go. When I outline the tree, I kind of go further in the cookie. I'm not stopping at that indent, but I am starting at the indent, okay? So I'm continuing to go, but then I start at this little indent here. Okay, and then I'm going to do the other side. Tip down, starting at the indent. Starting at the indent. All right, and now when I come to the bottom of the tree, I want to do my best to try to evenly have this curve. So what I'm going to do is I start here, looking a little bit ahead of where I want that icing to fall, and I'm going up, okay? Then I'm going to come over here and go up. So that is now even. Then I'll take my brown and I'm going to go ahead and outline the stump. All right, once you guys are to this point, you're going to go ahead and just move the tree out of the way. Anytime you move your cookie, just be very mindful that you're not sticking your finger back into that cookie. And then you're going to take your gingy and set that out, but I actually want to scooch this over. We're going to outline her, and that gingerbread one smells so good. I'm going to take my pink icing again, and I'm going to outline the heart. Now, I would recommend outlining like a few hearts on your paper towel before you move to your cookie. But worst case, if you mess up on your heart, you can always go back and wipe it off and then do the same thing we were doing before by brushing. But I'm using the pink icing because it's a thicker consistency than our brown, and we're gonna get a nicer, more sturdy heart that way. Then you're gonna come over to your gingy, and we're gonna go ahead and start outlining her. The reason why we're not filling in the cookie right away is because we need a small hole to outline the brown of our gingerbread. Okay, then we're gonna get to the fun part, my favorite part, which is flooding. All right, so I'm going to start here, right here at this indent, and when I'm outlining the head, I'm thinking circle, and I'm looking a little bit ahead of where I want this to fall. And when I get here to the bow, I'm getting close to that middle. I'm going all the way to that middle of the bow. That's where my icing goes. So it's not below the middle section, but it's pretty much on it, and that's how you can get a nice round circle here. And you all practice your circles, right? Tip down, lifting. These are kind of squared legs, but I'm not really putting my tip down until I get here. Tip down, lift, looking a little bit ahead of where I want that icing to go, and going as close to the edge as I can go. Okay, and then last is going to be the arm. Once you've outlined your gingy, you're going to take the white. Again, I'm going to cut a small hole and, test this line out before you do it on your cookie. But this is a small hole also for our details later. So try to keep that in mind when you're cutting your bag. And I'm just going to outline this bump here as well as this one right here. So go ahead and work on outlining the rest of your cookies. Again, you're going to outline both houses, then both trees, and then both gingies. All right, once all of your cookies are outlined and your pink heart has crusted, it only needs to crust for about 3 minutes before you can move on. But what I'm going to do is if I try to fill in this house with this teeny tiny hole, it would take way too long and my icing would start to crust and I wouldn't get a nice smooth surface. So what I want to do now is I want to cut my hole just a little bit more. But remember, this is very loose icing. You don't need to go wild and cut a giant hole. but just a little bit more. And you can also always cut more, okay? So always err on the like less is more to begin with. So right now I'm really going to want to make sure that I'm closing that tape really tight because we're actually going to be squeezing a little bit harder. So when I was outlining, I was telling you guys to lift your tip. But now I'm almost touching the cookie and I'm just gently squeezing, and I like to go around the outer edge first. My tip is close to that cookie as I gently squeeze the icing out. I don't want to be lifting my tip here. And I like to hold my tip kind of at straight up and down. So I'm just jiggling my tip to kind of smooth this out as I'm squeezing. And you have to move quickly when you are flooding your cookie because, again, icing does crust very quickly. So if you notice here, I'm not going to be leaving any holes. If you are having to spread your icing around a lot with your scribe tool, it probably means that you didn't add enough icing in there. So you want to make sure that you're adding enough. Once you're done flooding your first cookie or any cookie, once you flooded that cookie, take a look at that and make sure it's not spilling over, the icing's not spilling over. If the icing is spilling over, it's a quick, easy fix, and I'm going to show you how to do that. So we're nice and smooth. I didn't need to do much any work with my scribe, but if you do need to move anything around, make sure your scribe is clean. Hold it like a pencil, and I'm just jiggling the surface. I like to kind of drag this heart down, but you're just jiggling. And if icing is spilling over, remember, check this before you move on to your next cookie. You're just going to take your scribe and swipe around the edge. If you move on to your next cookie and you haven't checked to make sure icing isn't spilling over and you go back and it is, if you do this, you're going to wreck the surface of your cookie because it will have crusted. So make sure you're checking first. Once you're done flooding both of your houses, you're going to go ahead and come back to your Gingy. I'm just going to move her over here. And you're going to take out your little sprinkles. And I like to pick out 2 that are the same in size. So remember, finish both of your houses, the brown flooding, before you move on to this next cookie. So I'm trying to see which ones I'm going to use. So once you are done with both houses, you'll come over here, you'll pick out your black pearls for her eyes, and we're going to go ahead and start flooding her. If you notice, we did not fill in the roof or the door of the house. I don't want to fill that in until this brown has crusted, and the reason being is I like to let colors crust for a few minutes before I add another color next to it. So you'll notice I'm also not going to add the white yet for her bow section because I want this brown to crust. I find the cookie will lose its shape, or the design will kind of lose shape if I do that. So again, I'm close to the cookie. I'm really keeping this tape closed as I fill in the cookie. Jiggling my tip in there while I'm gently squeezing, okay? Jiggle, 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 gentle squeeze. So we actually have over 600 people taking this class this month. That is insane. I think this is the most we've ever done in a month. It's crazy. It's crazy, and I'm so thankful, and my employees have been so helpful. I would not have been able to do all of this without them, any of this without them. But I'm just kind of checking to make sure icing isn't spilling over. It likes to tend to kind of spill under the arms, so we want her to have nice, sharp armpits. So I'm just cleaning that up, making sure it's nice and cleaned up before I move on. And it looks like it's kind of going over right here. All right, so once you're done with that, you're gonna let these crust for a few minutes. If you have a fan at home, right now is a good time to put them in front of just like a table fan and help that crusting process. I forgot to mention, you want to put the eyeballs on while she's still wet. Oh my goodness, I almost forgot that. So while she's still wet, you're going to go ahead and put those on. I have a little fan on right now, so I'm going to turn that off. And I like to look at the picture to kind of guide me where I'm going to put the eyes. So when I place them, I'm just gently dropping them on the cookie. I'm not going to press them down though. Okay, if I need to scooch them, I'll take my scribe and I'll just be really gentle and scooch them. If you mess up on them, you can dig them out and try again. So make sure you add those eyes while she's wet. And again, I like to put a fan on them if I'm at home. Since you guys are home, that might help quicken the process of everything. So while you're letting those dry, you're going to come back to your tree. We don't need anything else outlined in green, so I'm actually going to cut my green bigger. We do need to do some details in green, and that's where I'm going to show you how to rebag. But once your gingerbread house and gingy are filled in, you're going to come to your tree and you're going to flood that just like you were doing with the other cookies. I cannot even get over how yummy that gingerbread cookie smells though. I want to just eat it plain. So I'm just jiggling my tip. It seems like this green is a touch thicker than our brown, so you're gonna actually have to really fill this cookie in and make it nice and puffy for it to smooth over. If you don't add enough icing in here, it will not smooth over. Also, if you are a little bit slower at flooding, you can flood from top to bottom, and that way no area is sitting for too long. The reason why this one's a touch thicker than our green or our brown is because we need to do some details with the green. So once that's flooded, this one is not going to smooth out on its own. That's okay. We're going to take our scribe and right away we're going to just kind of gently stab the cookie and give it a little shaky shake. So if you notice when you pick up your scribe, you're going to get all these little peaks. What I do to get rid of those is I wipe off my scribe and then I just gently touch the surface and sort of tap it anywhere that I see a little peak. You don't want to keep digging your scribe into the cookie. And then just like with the gingy's arms, I just want to make sure that nothing's falling over in these little corners and we're looking good. So once your gingy house and gingerbread is flooded, you're going to go ahead and flood your tree. So what I mean by flooding top to bottom, because this is a thicker icing, and again, we don't want things to crust, what I mean by that is you can just flood a section, and so that this section isn't sitting too long, now I can go to the next section and get that one, and then I'll come here. But you have to make sure you're adding enough icing in here. If it's flat, it's not going to smooth over as easily for you, if at all, so you want to make sure it's pretty puffy. Make sure you're holding that tape closed when you're filling this guy in. Now, if I have to move any icing over, I hold my scribe like a pencil and I kind of just jiggle the surface. And now I can take mine and kind of shake it. And then as I go up, I can kind of jiggle the surface with my scribe, and I want to keep wiping that off so I don't get, so I prevent those peaks. So just barely tapping that surface and that should do the job. Once both of your trees are filled in, you're going to come back to your gingy and you're going to fill in the white sections of the gingy's bow. Again, this is a thicker consistency because we are going to be doing some details with this white, so my biggest advice is just to really puff that icing up. I did not cut my hole bigger, I'm just jiggling my tip in there as I squeeze the icing out. Jiggle, jiggle, jiggle until it smooths out, and I'm slowly bringing my tip up the icing. And then you're gonna go ahead and fill in the green of your house. But you see how allowing that brown to kind of crust, we're keeping that nice shape of the house, of the brown of the house. So once that's nice and puffy, you can go back, taking your scribe, make sure you wipe that off. Right now I'm just jiggling the surface. Jiggle, jiggle. All right, and that looks good to me. So go ahead, once you're done flooding your tree, you're gonna go back to your gingy. You're going to add those white sections and then your roof, the roof of your house. All right, next up, we're going to actually add our little lollipops on the side of our house. So the way that I do that is I'm going to hold my tip close to the cookie, squeeze, 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 building this dot, and then my tip stays close to the cookie, but now I'm kind of going in a circular motion. This is with our pink icing, making it nice and puffy. If you lift up too soon, you're gonna get a point. So I'm really kind of pushing down on that, and then I'm gonna go ahead on this side, squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. See if I can not hide the camera on you. Jiggle that. Maybe do a few on your paper towel before you do it on your cookie, because that way you can kind of get a feel of that and you're not having to scrape anything off, because once you go on top of the cookie, it's kind of hard to scrape it off and not mess up your cookie. So I wanted to show you a close-up of the tree, and then if you need to see all 3 cookies at once, just watch this and then rewind so you can go back and see all the cookies. But what I'm doing is I'm filling in the stump, and what's going to happen is this is very loose icing. It's going to crater, which means it's going to kind of sink in the middle. So what I do is I fill it out until it's smooth, and then I come back and I add a little bit more just right in the middle. Okay, again, making sure icing isn't spilling over. If it is, I can catch that real quick. But I'm going to go ahead and take my white now, and I'm going to start my detail on the tree. So I start by making sure my tip is clean. I want you guys to do a few lines on your paper before you go to your cookie so that you can make sure that the line is coming out nice and clean, because you can't really go back with this. So my tip is touching the cookie. I'm going to start right up here. I'm lifting, going to this little indent right here. My tip goes down, cleaning it off, and then I'm going to go ahead over to this indent right here, tip down, and then finally right down there. While you are letting that white kind of crust a little bit, we're going to go back to our Gingy girl, and we can actually go ahead and finish her. So if at any point any of your floods are still really wet, you can tell the difference between a really like a freshly flooded cookie and one that has kind of crusted a little bit. It's just a different kind of shine. So if it's really shiny like you just flooded, you want to hold off on those lines. You don't want to add those right away. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start here in the center of the bow, and I'm going to lift up. Again, test your line to make sure that it's coming out nice and clean. And I'm doing a figure 8. Okay, once that is done, I can come back here and I'm going to add another line next to it. Once I've done that, I can come back immediately and I'm just going to fill it in. So I'm kind of pushing the line just slightly as I fill it in. And while I'm flooding this, I am jiggling my tip in there. This is a thicker consistency for our details, so you really have to jiggle that to smooth it out. And you really have to puff this up as well. So if you don't puff this up, you're not going to get a nice smooth bow. So I'm going to do the other side. So as I squeeze, I'm squeezing this whole time and jiggling my tip in there. So if you want to, once you're done watching this, do a few bows kind of on your paper towel before you do this on your cookie. That might be a good idea for you to get that feel of that jiggle, and you'll also see how much time you have to smooth it out. Because we're going to start crusting here in a minute. So once that's smoothed out, I can kind of take my scribe if I need to and just jiggle the surface at any spots. If you puff this up really nicely, it should smooth over pretty easily for you. Now I'm going to add the rest of her details. So with the white, make sure your tip is nice and clean here. My tip is touching, I'm lifting. I'm not going all the way to the edge of the cookie, but there's like 1/8 of an inch or so of brown, but you can go to the edge if you want. My tip goes down. Again, test this tip out before you commit to your cookie. If the hole is too big, go ahead and rebag it. I'm actually going to show you how to rebag in just a minute here. So if you need to rebag and need to see it, go ahead and fast forward a little bit when we get to the Gingy house. All right, then I'm going to add her little squiggles. I'm going to hold my tip close to the cookie as I go up and down. I'm not quite touching the cookie, but I am very close, almost touching the cookie as I squiggle this. And then she gets a little skirt. And this one I'm kind of lifting up a little bit. Practice squiggles though before you commit. Then she needs some cheeks, so I'm just going to wipe my pink off. So we're using pink here for the cheeks. Squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. When you're done squeezing and you get the size dot you want, release the pressure, then lift. Squeeze, 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 holding the tip close to the cookie the whole time. Release the pressure, then lift. And we're going to do that same method with the green. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the green button. Squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. And these might spread a touch, so I want to do them just a little bit smaller than what I would want. And I'm going to cut my yellow small, just like we have been doing in the beginning. Doesn't need to be tiny, but pretty small. And I'm going to spread that out, squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. And I want to leave a little bit of space because they may spread a little bit as they sit, especially if the base is kind of a little bit wet. Kind of like the size of an M&M, but you feel free to do whatever size you want. And she's so cute. She's not done yet. We're going to finish her in just a minute, but we're going to go back to our tree. So I'm going to switch sides here. And while we let her bow crust for a minute, we're going to go ahead and add those little lights. So now we're going to go ahead and add the lights to our tree. We allowed that line to crust, the little garland. So what I'm doing here is I'm holding my tip straight up and down, squeeze, 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 close to the cookie. I'm not moving my tip at all. I'm squeezing until I get the size dot that I want. Release the pressure, then I lift. Right next to it, squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. until I get the size dot, release the pressure, then lift. If you do get a peak, what you'll do is you'll clean off your scribe and just tap that peak and it should smooth over. The red is probably the only one that you might get a peak with. Yellow, squeeze, squeeze, squeeze until that dot is the size that you want. And I like to look at the other dots to just kind of make sure that they're similar in size, but you know, if you want to do alternating different sizes and everything, you can totally do that. That would be cute. And you might get more dots than I get. You might get less. It depends on what size that you do here. And I'm going to go all the way down the tree, and I just like to alternate the colors. So next is going to be yellow. Squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. Pink. If you jiggle your tip in there too, it should help kind of push down that red. I'm going to try to fit a red one right here. I don't know if I'm going to regret it or not. I might regret that. That's okay. And down below. We have not put any Christmas decorations up at our house yet. And I'm trying to think of when I'm going to have time to do that, because I have classes almost every single night up until mid-December. And I'm going to I told my kids that we would do it tomorrow, but I forgot I'm going to Disneyland tomorrow, so that's not going to happen. We'll figure it out though. There was one year when my kids were all really little where I bought a tree Christmas Eve at Home Depot. I had my business and it was chaos, but I promised them a tree and we went Christmas Eve and we got a dry tree and I still had to pay $60 for it. That was ridiculous. Now we have fake tree, which I like real trees, but the fake trees are nice as well. Okay, yes, there is our tree. It's so cute. So cute. Now you can go back to your Gingy and you can actually finish her bow. So our tree is done. That is our first completed cookie, and now we're just about to complete our second cookie, which is our Gingy. And I'm just going to add her little dot, and you can even do a different colored dot on here, but just like before, we're just squeezing, making it nice and puffy. But we want that bow to kind of crust before we do that. She's done as well. All right, now we're going to do some details on our house. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add these little white lines. But actually, before you do that, so scratch that, you want to outline the house first. So we're just going to take the white, tip down, lift up. You want to do the house first because otherwise these little lines on the lollipops are going to kind of get in the way. So do the lines first, then add the little lines on the lollipop. And I am not adding lines on the door yet because I want to flood the door. But first I want to show you how to rebag your green because we need to do the details for our green. So I'm going to go ahead and switch the camera over. So you have your nice empty bag. I'm going to go ahead and rebag the green so that I can recut. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just cut a large hole out of this old bag, open up the new bag, insert the old bag into the new bag, I'm holding the tail of this old bag and squeezing the outside of the new bag, and I'm just going to squeeze it in, and as I'm squeezing, I'm pulling out the old bag. So now I have a fresh bag and an old bag, and then I'll just tie this in a knot, just like so that I can start doing my details. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and do the details on my house, at least the roof right now. I'm going to cut my hole small, just like we did in the beginning of class. So tiny hole, so I have a fresh new hole. I'm starting with my tip on the cookie, and I'm just going to re-outline this roof. Tip down. Tip down. I'm not going to outline the sides though, just the top, the bottom. And I want to move fast here because I don't want this icing to crust. I'm going to add little nonpareils on here. I'm going up the middle, and then I'm going to do 2 lines going down. You can do as many lines as you would like. Test out your green before you commit to your cookie. But move fast. If you need to do one side and then add the nonpareils and then do the other side, you can do that. But I'm just going to take my sprinkles and just drizzle those on to the roof. So that one's already crusted. The top's kind of crusted already. Once you're done with that, you can cut your red. Oh, nope, you can't. Now you're going to go back to your lollipops, and you're just going to do your little lollipop swirl. So do this a few times on your paper towel before you commit to your cookie, but I'm going around once, and then to the edge, or close to the edge, and then around again, and then my tip goes back down. So I'll do the same thing, going around, kind of going close to the edge, back around. And I'll come here and I'm going to do the little bow. So I start with my tip close to the cookie, just like we practiced, and dragging down. And as I'm dragging down, I'm slowly releasing the pressure to make these 2 little petals, I guess you could call it. Okay, and then you're going to come up to you can actually cut your red bigger. Actually, we're going to hold off on that. We're going to do the little dots on our house. And the way that I like to do that is I'm going to start with the pink here. And then I'm going to do pink on this side. I'm going to go off the picture. So I've done 2 dots. Now I'm going to do a red right here in the middle. Okay. Next to these, I'm going to do red. And I'm kind of looking to make sure I'm spread apart on here. But I messed up, but it's okay. Yellow, yellow. Pink. So now it should be red, but we have red at the top. So what am I going to do? What should I do, guys? I think I'm going to try, should I try to pick that off or just leave it? I don't know, because I can fit one more. I'm scared. I'm going to try to pick this one off. Oh my goodness. I'm being very gentle. This is why you guys are watching it first, so you can not make the same mistake as I make. I'm very gently just swiping this. And then I'm going to take my finger and just sort of, just the spot that I know is going to show. Then I'll go red. I would not recommend doing that, what I just did. That's okay. So now we'll go with yellow. Okay, it's kind of hidden. There we go. That's not too bad. Then I can cut my red hole bigger, but first I want to add these little dots here. So this only needs a second to dry. Add a little red dot here and here. So remember when you're adding your dots that they are going to spread a little bit more, so just keep that in mind. I'm going to take my red, and again, the red is thick. We needed that for our details, so you're going to need to add extra puffiness to this door. So it's not going to smooth out on its own. It's going to stay like that. Then I'm going to come back with my scribe and jiggle, jiggle, jiggle. The only way that's going to smooth out is if you added enough, okay? And my yellow is going into my red. So now you guys can see what not to do with your little lights, right? And then you can come back and you can just add your little door handle. But first I'm going to actually come around the door with the white. And you can let that door kind of crust first before you do it. And then I'll add my little green doorknob. And you can wait a few minutes to add your green doorknob, but I'm just going to add that right now. And there you go. All right, so there are our cookies. If you want to pause this so you can keep looking at them while you finish them up. We're just going to transition here real quick. Isn't she so cute? I love the way she turned out. I love all of these cookies. So I hope you guys have a wonderful evening or day and a very Merry Christmas. Thank you so much for joining me. I will see you guys in January. Bye.